Hello and welcome to City Focus. I'm Diane Gonzalez. Lincoln voters will go to the polls April the 7th to vote on whether to increase the city's sales tax by a quarter-cent. The proceeds would fund 2 public safety projects for the city. While we can't use city resources to tell you how to vote, we can provide the information that you need to make an informed decision. Here to help me do that today is city's Public Safety Director, Tom Cassidy. Tom, let's start first by talking about the 2 projects that the sales tax would help to fund.
Diane, this proposal would fund 2 projects, the first of which is the replacement of our aging public safety radio system used by our police officers and firefighters and others in city government and other units of government. And the second project would be to build new fire stations, 4 new fire stations to serve the growing area of Lincoln. And the proposal that voters will be considering is whether to authorize a 1/4 cent increase in the city sales tax for 3 years in order to fund these 2 projects.
And how much would that raise? How much do the projects cost, and how much would that sales tax increase raise?
We're estimating the total cost of these projects at about $34.5 million, both projects combined. A 1/4 cent sales tax would raise a little over $12 million per year. So it'll raise enough money to fund these projects and perhaps just a little bit left over.
Well, let's talk first about the radio system, and we're going to take a look at some slides here. Well, tell us more about the radio system.
Our radio system was first acquired by the city in 1987 from General Electric. It's a little over 27 years old at its core, and although it's been well maintained and upgraded significantly on a couple of occasions during that 27-28 year period, it's really reached the end of its life cycle. It's a critical piece of municipal infrastructure, critical to public safety. It's used millions of times every year by our police officers and firefighters and other public safety personnel. It's been a good system. It's served us very, very well over those years, but the problem we're running into now is that it's simply more than 27 years old, and it's time to replace it.
A lot of technology has changed over 27 years.
Yeah, and that's really our fundamental problem here is the technology has moved on. And like a lot of other mid-1980s technology, it's now obsolete. And that's why the system has to be replaced. It's simply run its course, and people who could work on this system, manufacturers who made the components of the system, no longer making those. The technicians are all retiring, and vendor support in all of its entirety is ending completely in 2017.
Now, which agencies will use the new radio system?
The radio system has over 2,300 users. The majority of those are Lincoln police officers and Lincoln Fire and Rescue personnel. But it's also used by the county sheriff's deputies, by the University of Nebraska Lincoln Police Department, by the Capitol Security Division of the State Patrol, by the Airport Authority Police, some use by our rural fire departments, used at all of our hospitals to communicate with our paramedics out in the field, and then some other users that are not public safety, such as the Public Works Department in their apparatus.
Now, the second project to be funded through a potential sales tax increase would be it deals with the location of fire stations across the city. Tell us about that.
Right. Lincoln has 14 fire stations, Diane, and we're not ideally located for the new growth that's occurred in Lincoln. And the reason we're not is because we haven't added a fire station since 1997. And since that fire station was added, Lincoln's grown significantly. On this slide, you can see the blue area that represents the city limits of Lincoln as they existed in 1997. And the light gray area that's the city limits today, there's been a lot of geographic growth, over 22 square miles. And we've also added 57,000 people to our population during that time period. And just to give you some perspective on this, in both the land area and the population, that's about the equivalent of the city of Manhattan, Kansas. So what we have proposed is to spread out our resources to cover the growth area by moving some of our fire stations, and we're proposing to build 4 new fire stations, but to staff those with existing personnel resources. So we would literally be spreading out, much as we did throughout our early history, to cover the growing area of the city.
Now, the relocation of the fire stations also includes the co-location of a new police station with a fire station, correct?
Yes, these plans have been under development for many years now. We've been planning new fire stations for over a decade. And we've also been planning to eventually build a new police station in southeast Lincoln. I think these projects go together really well. It makes a lot of sense to build one of these 4 fire stations as a joint facility for police and fire, because we can save some of the costs of things like architectural fees and land acquisition and even some of the construction costs by sharing some of the space and some of the infrastructure. Today, our police officers that work in southeast Lincoln deploy from downtown headquarters here at 9th and J Street. And it's a long route to get out to the southeast team area. And anyone that's ever been in traffic in the mid-afternoon through the early evening, trying to get out to the southeast Lincoln on something like Highway 2 or Normal, can probably realize that it takes a long time for those police officers after their 2:30 shift change or the 4 o'clock shift change to get out to where they're needed in southeast Lincoln. So we know we can save some fuel. We know we can save a lot of time that's involved in that commute. But more than anything, we can get our officers out to where the incidents are occurring more quickly and enhance public safety in that way.
Now, the goal of this relocation proposal is to reduce response times. Tell us why that's important and what areas are too far away right now.
4 minutes is a pretty critical number in life-threatening emergencies, Diane, such as a structure fire, and especially for life-threatening medical emergencies like stroke, cardiac arrest, traumatic injury, chest pain. And we have about 90,000 addresses that are inside the city limits of Lincoln. 10,000 of those addresses are more than 4 minutes drive time from the closest fire station. So the yellow dots represent those 10,000 addresses out of the total of 90,000 that are located in areas that are more than 4 minutes from a fire station. These are the areas where we're at risk for life-threatening medical emergencies that we can't get to in those golden moments. And by relocating these 4 fire stations and staffing them with existing personnel, we can reduce that significantly. In fact, the number goes down by 6,500 addresses. It's a 65% improvement in our ability to cover the growth areas in Lincoln. And more of that development that's occurring out on the edges of the city is not only beyond our reach, but it includes some of our higher risk populations. If you drive around Lincoln, you'll see a lot of new assisted living and senior living facilities that are being built, and those are the places that we're most likely to have the kinds of life-threatening emergencies that we need to be close to. And that's another good reason that we're proposing that we should consider moving some of these stations to cover that growing area.
Now, how was the decision made to put the sales tax issue on the ballot? It all started with the state legislature, correct?
About 2 years ago, the legislature authorized cities to increase their sales tax by up to 1/2 cent for capital improvement projects if the people voted to do that. And we had a 13-person committee appointed last fall to study these 2 public safety projects and to make recommendations on a funding mechanism. I had the pleasure of chairing that committee. They worked very hard over the 2-month period that they considered these proposals. The committee looked at 7 different funding options, and the committee ultimately unanimously recommended to the mayor that both of these projects move forward and that they be funded with a 1/4 cent sales tax that would last 3 years. The state law requires that the sales tax have a limited duration. It requires a vote of the people, and that's what the committee recommended. And the primary reason the committee recommended sales tax is because the sales tax increase would generate the right kind of revenue to fund these projects pretty much on a pay-as-you-go basis and avoid the long-term financing costs that would be incurred if they were funded with another method, such as a 20-year bond issue. It's a huge difference. Financing $34.5 million over 20 years, even with the city's AAA bond rating, would incur somewhere more than $10 million in interest costs, whereas we think with a 3-year 1/4 cent sales tax, will generate enough revenue that we can essentially pay for these projects as the expenses are due.
If you had chosen the bond issue as well, or if the committee had, that would have just affected property tax owners too, putting the entire burden on property tax owners and not necessarily on others who use the system.
And less than half of the residents in Lincoln are property taxpayers. So one of the nice things about sales tax is it spreads the cost out against everyone, including people that visit Lincoln, people that don't own real estate here in Lincoln. Everyone pays the sales tax if they buy goods and services in the city. So we're really spreading the cost of these projects out over a much larger base. And it makes a lot of sense, really, when you think about it, that the people who come here and buy services and buy goods are also the same people who are likely to need the services of police and fire and rescue.
And many people don't own property inside Lincoln, but they are employed by someone in the city.
Also quite true. So for people who work here in Lincoln or come here on a regular basis but don't live inside the city limits, they may not pay property tax, but the majority of those people are using goods and services here in Lincoln, so would be paying sales tax.
Now, is there an option to extend the 3-year sales tax beyond 3 years?
There is not. The ballot issue has to specify the duration of the tax increase, and it cannot be extended by any action of the mayor or the city council. If the law is still on the books in its current form at the end of 3 years and someone wants to propose a new ballot issue, that's something that could certainly happen, but you cannot extend this sales tax.
Well, thank you very much, Tom, for explaining the issue to us today. Again, we want to encourage voters to learn all they can about the public safety sales tax proposal before they go to the polls on April 7th. We will post a fact sheet along with additional information, including that committee's recommendation, on the city website. You'll want to check that out at lincoln.ne.gov. Again, thank you, Tom, and thank you for joining us for City Focus.